We're back, live in studio with Samuel Azurzer in the business headquarters of Radio Shalom, 1650 AM in Montreal, with the Money and Business Show. You have questions about your personal finances? You need advice in making sound financial decisions? Samuel and his guests are ready to take your call at 514-738-4100, extension 200. And now, back to the Money and Business Show.
We're back with Jack Ben-Simon, Managing Director of Black Swan Diagnostic. And today's topic is online security threats of customers of financial institution buyers beware. And if anybody doesn't know, today the U.S. Federal Reserve was hacked and compromised, and privacy data over almost 4,000 U.S. bank officials, executives, were hacked. Go ahead, Jack. Back to you, Jack, in Toronto.
I'm here today with Adam Sculthorpe. Adam is founder of BitVelocity and an online security expert, as well as an online privacy expert. Adam, I want to get to some of the fundamentals of online security threats. What do we mean when we speak of online security threats?
An online threat, actually, is an individual, a criminal organization, or a government, and they're motivated by a financial, political, or other agenda to exploit a new or known vulnerability. An online threat, I consider an online threat as a threat source. So the threat is the source of the threat.
So why are these securities issues considered threats and not necessarily risks for customers of financial institutions?
Well, it's a good question. Threats really are just that. They exist all the time, and they're a threat that looms over financial institutions, requiring them to either fail to patch a known vulnerability, be unaware or unable to defend against a new vulnerability, or make some other mistake. The reason these threats are not necessarily risks is because, for the most part, the vulnerabilities are well managed. And new vulnerabilities are pretty difficult to discover. But as we've seen today with the Federal Reserve, if those protection systems are not well managed, even for just 30 seconds or a minute, then data gets compromised and leaked.
Using the Federal Reserve as an example you talked about, what makes one online security threat more dangerous or pervasive than the next?
Well, the threat itself is powerless without an exploitable vulnerability. So what's really dangerous is when a threat source, i.e. an individual, criminal organization, or government, discovers a new vulnerability that's unknown to somebody like the Federal Reserve or another intended target. And in this case, there's likely to be a serious impact on the victim, even if the window of opportunity is very limited or isolated. And unfortunately, when these types of attacks are successful, they can go undiscovered for months or years, which is why one of my focuses at the moment is on privacy testing, because we can discover those breaches as they're in progress where other intrusion systems and protection systems can't.
Now, you touched about this patching process. Can you describe this patching process and why it's important in mitigating online security threats?
Well, the patching process itself is fairly simple and straightforward. As new vulnerabilities are discovered and fixed by the software vendor, a patch is applied to existing online systems and included in new system builds for new machines. And over time, new vulnerabilities are discovered and the cycle repeats. The time between discovery and patching is the critical time. And the Federal Reserve could be an example here, because it could be that there's been a gap between the discovery of a new vulnerability and then patching it. So the most successful attacks are automated and optimized to exploit that time gap. Unfortunately, humans aren't yet capable of working at light speed, so someone needs to fix that, but I'm not sure how it might affect rates of pay. So
what are some weaknesses or vulnerabilities to patching?
You can't patch what you don't know about. That's the biggest issue here. And again, this is what could have affected the Federal Reserve, I don't know. But this is why I believe privacy testing is so important. It's a no-brainer to me that we have to assume there's always a vulnerability we don't know about, and also assume that that vulnerability is being actively exploited. So privacy testing focuses primarily on detection of theft and misuse of personal and business data. It's nice to be compliant and meet standards and be a good boy in terms of regulatory compliance, but these things are not substitutes for testing what's actually happening to the data that enters that system and where it's being used and misused.
Sam, on to you in Montreal for the next segment.
Yes, that's right. And thanks again. If you have any questions or email anything about the show, please give us a call of 514-738-4100, extension 200, or you can email me. I'll ask the questions at moneyandbusinessshow@gmail.com. I have here Adam. How are you?
I'm great, sir. How are you?
Good, good. Adam, I just the other night I was watching, you know Kevin O'Leary with The Exchange, right? With Amanda Lang.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, he thinks...
He's a popular guy, right?
Yeah, very popular, right? Funny guy, too. But I think he's a nice guy deep inside. You know, one of the things he said he doesn't really believe that it was the Chinese who hacked, well, let's say the banks, the institutions, and all that. And maybe the Federal Reserve. Do you believe that?
You know what? I'm really glad you brought this up because, you know, one of the issues is that it's very difficult to determine who is actually doing what. We have these tools called geolocation systems that are able to tell us that an IP address, that's the internet connection address that an attack is coming from,
right, is
located in a certain country. But what is common is that a hacker in the US or the UK or Canada or anywhere in the world often exploits systems in China and uses China as a point to hop back into the US and hide and obfuscate their attack, you know, their original attack point. So it may not be Chinese government hacking these corporations and media outlets. It could be some kid sitting in New York City that's hopping via China, right?
Right, exactly. And you know, he doesn't feel, he feels that it's not the Chinese government. It could be somebody else who's doing it. And not only that, but he says if it is the Chinese, he wants to hire them. He does. He wants to hire them.
You know, Kevin's a very creative guy.
Yes, I know.
I understand his point, so it's funny. Yeah.
Yes, that's right. And also, I just wanted to tell you, the online security threat seems to be even more pervasive among, you know, financial institutions. I don't know why, but compared to other industry, can you maybe let us, you know something why the financial institutions are so prone for hacking?
Well, they have all the money, right? I mean, there are many reasons for it. First of all, the individual inside attacker threat is much higher because the stakes are higher. The risk is higher due to the sheer number of employees that financial institutions have, particularly in IT departments and security departments. And the bad guy's perceived ability to hide somewhere in the noise so that you know, actual attacks in these cases have and will be successful to some degree. Even though they're rare, they get massive press attention. So it makes a great story. And in reality, financial institutions' websites are a lot safer than small to mid-sized businesses, but they're perceived as being a much more juicy target, and they are. Right?
Well, they are. You're right. They have all the money. But what are some of the unique factors or threats to these financial institutions that don't normally exist in other industries?
Primarily greed and envy. There's greed and envy associated with the institutions themselves, and it's that simple. Financial institutions are often perceived as gigantic, profitable, greedy, cash-rich, and this results in a disproportionate number of people that work for these institutions, often feeling more entitled to a bigger slice of the cake. Greed breeds greed, and the resulting sense of entitlement in some individuals, particularly insiders, and I've personal experience of this, can lead to devastating losses for the financial institution.
And you're right. You're 100% right. It's always all the time the financial institutions. So what shape do these security threats normally look like?
The real big threats come from individuals in positions of power. You know, it's proven historically that you know, the big breaches and the big costs to financial institutions come from individuals in position of power within a powerful environment. So, it could be a disgruntled IT guy who didn't get the salary increase he wanted. So because he's in control of powerful infrastructure that protects the financial institution and feels powerful, he might do something very damaging. And I've seen this happen in an investment bank, and the losses were significant when an IT guy ran a script to shut down a trading floor, and it cost the investment bank millions of dollars.
Yeah, and you know what? HSBC doesn't help. I mean, these guys, I think it was maybe a couple of weeks ago, they got nailed, one of the biggest, right, Jack? One of the biggest fines because they were dealing with the drug cartel?
Well, what you're talking about was UBS Bank.
Oh, UBS, that's right.
It was an anti-money laundering breach, anti-terrorist financing breach, which there were privacy issues involved, incidentally. I don't know if those I'm suspecting that some of those privacy breaches were related to some online security threats, but they were primarily at sort of the face-to-face level in terms of lack of due diligence and breaches in those areas.
And it doesn't help, right, Adam? I mean, these are the big guys who are, helping the Iranians, funnel money and launder money. Is that right, Adam?
It's essentially that's what they're doing. Whether somebody knows they're doing it inside, I don't know and I can't comment on. But ultimately, yes, that's what's going on.
So how do you patch?
Far-reaching.
So tell me, Adam. So how do you identify patterns? With your expertise, of course, to patch new online security threats in the financial institution space.
Well, unusual traffic patterns themselves can be discovered by skilled security staff operating intrusion detection and prevention systems, which in turn can lead into in-depth analysis of what the actual attacker is trying to achieve. And it can then usually be blocked until a patch can be released, if it's the case of a new vulnerability. So we see, unusual traffic patterns, and then they get acted on, and then that raises, more concern, and more research is put into what are they actually attacking. Because when it's a new vulnerability, we often don't know what they're attacking.
That's right. And, we have about a minute and a half, Adam. What should a customer do, or a client of the institutions, financial institutions, to be concerned about the veracity and the frequency of online security threats to their financial accounts and privacy?
Well, end customers should be concerned because losses are occurring every day. It's becoming increasingly common. Just last week, 2 individuals told me they had their accounts compromised, and that they told me that on the same day. One person was in Canada and the other one was in the US, and the amounts weren't trivial. One of them was $12,000. As an account holder, you need to take personal responsibility and be diligent about checking statements, making sure your PC is secure as it can be, and I recommend using a browser such as Google Chrome's browser. And I'm also launching a new version of Internet Encrypt in the next few weeks. So that massively enhances its security. So watch out for that.
And you know what, Adam? It just happened actually personally for my father. You wouldn't believe what happened is that he was supposed to get his his RIF payments. He didn't receive it. So we found out that it was going to a bank account in Ontario. And we just found that out maybe a couple of weeks ago. So, the financial institutions, I'm not going to name who they are, pretty embarrassed. And we told them, I said, how could this happen? And they said, well, we're going to do our research, But look, it just happened personally when you're just talking about this, But like I said, it happens to everybody. And Adam, please stay on the line, okay? We have another segment to go, another couple of more segments to go. Again, my name is Samuel Zerzer for the Money and Business Show on Radio Shalom, CJRS 1650 AM Montreal. We'll be right back in 2 minutes.